Hello and welcome to DMs with PM. It is the 5th episode in this, our 3rd season. I am your host, Oslin Crosby, and it is always a pleasure to be here with you. Today, though, is a solemn day here in Grenada, another in quick succession. And while others are having fun, Trinidad, Dominica, and our sister Isle, we know that our mainland is grieving. While we do so, I know today Prime Minister Mitchell would have spoken to it in Parliament as the bills were debated, but I think as a nation it calls us to action. Action in us playing our part in ensuring that we rid our land of this scourge of domestic violence. It is not just the government's responsibility, but it is all of us. Prime Minister, welcome to today's program. Always a pleasure.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here again this evening with all of the viewers and listeners, and I want to thank the citizens of Grenada for continuing to support the program, for continuing to listening, and obviously engaging by asking the questions or the DMs from the street or the DMs. So you opened obviously on a very somber note, and yes, it's 2 Tuesdays in a row that we are starting the program with having to mourn the loss of the life of a young female. So I want to start off by again expressing condolences and sympathy to the family of Tereshale Sebastian and to the wider community in Tivoli and the surrounding areas. This is not news that we would want to be waking up to so soon after the tragic loss of life that happened in Croshu. So, I mean, it's words can't really convey, I think, the depression that I'm feeling over having to see that another young female has lost her life again to violence. But we want at this time at least to remember her. Candlelight vigil is taking place as we speak in Tivoli, and so we want to urge members of the community and well-wishers to go out and support the family and to take part in the vigil, and for us to remember them in their prayers, and obviously to, as we come out of these tragic incidents, for us to recognize that it's not just the emotion and the anger and the rage. We have to actually channel that passion into behaviors that will mitigate and minimize the risk of these things happening in the future. So it will require a Herculean effort to change the underlying culture that has created this environment where people resort to violence as a means of, well, it doesn't solve anything. It actually just makes things worse, because you've destroyed the life of a young person. You have effectively destroyed your life, and has probably destroyed the life of the families surrounding both the victim and the perpetrator of the crime. So as a Prime Minister, I think first and foremost as a father, I want to express condolences to the parents of the young lady who died, and to the wider extended family. And then obviously as the political leader of the National Democratic Congress and as the Prime Minister of Grenada, for us to recognize that it will take collective action. As I said in Parliament, this is not an issue that is going to pick which political side or which religion you are on, because it could impact anybody at any time. And so it's important for us to, in a sense, sometimes take the temperature down by making sure that we can focus on what matters, which is the families at this time, and then to find sustained effort over a sustained period of time that will address how we view violence and to minimize us encouraging behaviors that glorify violent behavior and behaviors that continue to suggest that women in particular and young girls are property of men. And that is a culture that we definitely have to fight against. But it will take all of us collectively working to address those issues.
Yes, I truly concur on that. I know we did not get an opportunity to say welcome to our listeners on the various radio stations and our social media platforms. I do believe that today, though, would have summoned that level of seriousness and somberness to today's program, as I do believe that we all feel the same way.
Yes, indeed.
Prime Minister, as we move forward, though, on today's program, we know that you were at Parliament this morning, and what is happening outside forms part of bills that are now being debated in the House. And I think sometimes it is misinterpreted what we see and how it ties to what is happening and how it will affect change. And I wanted to bring some clarity to that for us today.
Right. So, well, I think first we should point to that the amendment to the domestic violence bill was actually long in the making, and it is part of a series of amendments to legislation to address gender-based violence, intimate partner violence, to address protecting children in general. Some of these are part of the Spotlight Initiative bills, some of them are not. So this administration and even the previous administration would have already begun embarking on a series of legislative changes aimed at strengthening victims' rights, aimed at ensuring that persons who are the subject of abuse, including, for example, online bullying or the use of images, whether it's pornographic or otherwise, or persons' personal data, confidential information is not used to blackmail them or bully them or to abuse them. And all of this is part of addressing the emerging, changing facets of how abuse takes place given the rampant use of technology. So it's, in a sense, merely coincidental, although it's a bad coincidence, really, that in the space of essentially a week, we've had 2 young women losing their lives to violence. And so I think it underscores the urgency of making sure that we don't engage in hypocrisy and that we actually admit that the country has a problem, right? These are not isolated incidents. There's a long list of young women, some of them children. MP Redhead mentioned Ariel Bola in Parliament today. There's a long list of women and children who've lost their lives to violence by people they know. And almost every day, I sit as a member of Parliament in my office, and sometimes 1 out of every 2 women who shows up in my office complains of or alleges some form of abuse from some partner or some person that they know. So this is not some isolated cultural behavior here. This is actually widespread. The extreme cases where people lose their lives. So it is quite clear. Some of the members of Parliament for the opposition talked about homes for battered women and so on, that the Honourable Yolande Hossford-Bain was part of forming. So the fact that it was happening as far back as 30 years ago means we clearly have not done enough to turn the tide on this issue. So legislative changes is one, but to a large extent the legislation is always dealing with post the fact, right? How you protect someone after they've already been exposed to abuse, how you get a restraining order, what are the definitions of domestic violence so that people are not left out and that they can seek the protection of the law and so on. But that is all in cases where it is already happening. What we really need to work on is to make sure it does not happen. And that's where the issue of education comes in, not just in the formal sense in school, but in terms of our actual cultural practice and our cultural behavior and how we socialize our boys, how we socialize our girls, how we speak to them, how we view violence, right? And, the truth is some of these things are so pervasive that even in the context of entertainment, it is taken as a given. I mean, we think about it, Christmas times, toy guns, we have march passes, there are guns everywhere. So the truth is there's an underlying culture where violence and the things associated with violence have been normalized. And if we are not prepared to really wake up and say, okay, if the consequences of this is that more and more people are going to lose their lives, more and more people are going to be physically, mentally, or emotionally abused, that we need to walk back some of those things, then it's not going to happen. Then you have to look at the widespread, prevalent abuse of alcohol. And the role alcohol plays oftentimes in fueling or exacerbating domestic violence, not just between adults, but even amongst parents and children. And the widespread child abandonment that oftentimes comes with domestic violence, because when people are drunk, they essentially can't function. And children are left oftentimes to grow up on their own. So all of these systematic things are part of what we have to tackle as a society, and when you say things that are unpopular, it's not because I want to be unpopular, but you have to say the truth. If you go to all of our school sports, alcohol is sold openly. It's a clear breach of the school policies. But alcohol is prevalent everywhere, and people are not having a drink, right? They're selling beers and so on by the caseload. And we are saying we are doing it to raise funds, right? To raise funds to do what? If ultimately then we're encouraging children to drink at a younger age because they're exposed to it at a quite early age as well, and it's normalized, then all of those things will happen. So if we really want to begin to address some of these issues, we can't have policy and then disobey the policy. So you can't have a school policy that says no alcohol in schools or in events involving children, and alcohol is widespread and accepted, and then you say children shouldn't drink, right? So this is part of the challenge that we face. We can't say we don't believe in violence, and then we say capital punishment is okay, and that a parent should be able to beat their child, because the child is going to, after a while, accept that violence is normal, and that child in turn will internalize it, and then they too will think it is okay to inflict violence on people. So there are a lot of these, I can't even call them double standards. There are a lot of these complete contradictions that we have to begin to address in the society if we are going to tackle some of the underlying challenges that we face in terms of the abuse and the violence we see. But in many instances, some of the abuse it may be innocent in the sense that ignorance fuels the wrong type of behavior. So if a parent grew up thinking discipline means shouting, cussing, or beating the child, unless you could educate that parent to say, no. Discipline means talking to your child, explaining to them why it is you're asking them to go to bed at a certain time, because it impacts their ability to perform next day in the school, they'll be tired, etc., etc. If parents get to understand that you actually want your children to speak up, to be able to tell you how they're feeling, yes, to be able to argue with you so that you see their perspective, because sometimes they're right. It doesn't mean you have to slap the child or box the child, right? If we don't educate parents, then what is going to happen is, of course, the parent will continue doing what they're doing, thinking that they're doing the right thing, right? So in their mind, they'll be saying, I'm disciplining my child because I want my child to grow up to be a good child. I want him to be hardworking, I want him to go to school on time, I want him to listen to the teacher, etc. If they don't do that, I'm going to beat them into compliance. The problem is, the parent may genuinely be coming from a good place, well-intentioned, but I think we all know that's abuse. Well, I shouldn't say we all know. Some of us will accept that it's abuse, some of us may say it's not abuse. And we have to have the conversation and be able to explain why to that same parent, the downside of that kind of behavior, and that there are alternatives, and that there are societies where they don't beat the children to a pulp and the crime rate is not greater than Grenada, or the children are not more ill-disciplined than Grenada. So a lot of it, I think, has to come with, that's what I mean about changing the cultural norms, because in many places it's coming from a good place. People want to discipline their children. But if you do so by violence, then what you're teaching them is to be violent and to also accept that violence is a normal part of their behavior.
Yeah. There was something that you said today in Parliament that I took away, the imparting, or rather the reversal of that, of teaching our children values and morals. I think one of the challenges we have, though, is that we have some young parents that still need to be taught some of those things. So it's you cannot impart that which you don't have. So how do we then deal with this? So it takes us back to the time of the revolution, when we heard about the adult programs that they used to have to help parents with parenting issues, how to parent, how to deal with children that may be a bit troubled. And I think it is a bigger problem. Mental issues comes to play. How do you deal with issues as a man? Do you speak? Do you not speak? Do you pass it on to somebody else? And all of those things, and that is why I appreciated when you commented today and you said it is almost as if we need to reverse the things that, the tenets that we grew up on, that made us who we are, that we seem to want to ignore now and adopt a new modern approach that has so many ills with it.
Well, I would say this, if you don't know why you're here on it, if you don't know what your purpose is, if you don't have a concept of what is the appropriate behavior or not, then you will just drift. And things like violence and disruption will become normal, right? So in many instances, when you have those issues, there are other underlying issues that are plaguing the challenges, right? That are plaguing the person that is either committing the violence or the person who is accepting the violence. And oftentimes, it gets to the point where the victims probably figure, well, it doesn't matter because the society has already failed me. No one is going to come and rescue me, so they stay in the situation where they're in. But as I've said, the persons who are committing the violence and the abuse and the intimate partner violence and the incest, they're somebody's child too. So we also have to figure out what went wrong and what is going wrong that would lead them to behave that way. And so, yes, we have to focus on the victims and on mitigating the risk to the victims and on making sure that there's justice for the victims. But if we don't also concentrate on how we get the persons who are perpetrating or likely to perpetrate or at risk to perpetrate those issues, then obviously we will not be able to mitigate or stop or minimize what is taking place. So a lot of emphasis has to go into ensuring that we can encourage behaviors that don't lead to someone wanting to engage in incest, engage in violence, engage in child abuse or partner abuse. And therefore, obviously, at a very, very early age, I think given how widespread this is, we are obviously going to have to focus a lot more on policy and research and behavioral changes to ensure that we can encourage, in a sense, more safe and less violent behaviors amongst all of us.
I agree. Thank you very much, Prime Minister. We are going to take a break now. When we come back, we will be sharing the first part of your DMs with you.
My name is Liselle Walcott. I am a staff nurse at the General Hospital for the past 16 years. At the Infection Control Department, we do surveillance for communicable diseases or hospital-acquired infections. We do outbreak investigations. So any issues we have, we would investigate it, find out the cause, and we would do recommendations and interventions to all relevant departments. Thus far, with Mount Sinai, we are looking at ways of improving hand hygiene. Hand hygiene has been proven to be one of the most important practice you could do to break the chain of infection. Working along with Mount Sinai, I foresee that it would be a very good thing for us. They are looking into the products that we use, the practices that we do. Going forward, we'll be able to achieve a very high level of compliance and safety across the board for everyone.
Welcome back. If you are just joining us, you just missed our chit-chat, Prime Minister sharing on the domestic issues, some of the two deaths we've had, and more recent, today's incident. Now we are going to get into some of your questions, some of your DMs sent to us. Our first will be on lifelong learning. What was one thing you enjoyed about your tenure in secondary school that you believe enhanced your overall educational experience, and would you recommend it today if it's absent? From Khalifa.
Thank you, Khalifa, for the question. It's actually quite a difficult question. I don't think it's absent today, but I think for me, my friends actually were a critical part of my education process. And so I'm mindful that for students who went to school in Grenada during the COVID period, that a significant portion of their school experience would have been cut short, and perhaps opportunities to make even more friends or friends that they would have missed because they had school almost, or did not have school for almost 2 years. And so that period of bonding is something that I think certainly, if I may call it the COVID generation, would have missed and would have had cut short, which is why I think it's critical in a school environment to make sure that children get the opportunity to play, get the opportunity to collaborate and not always compete. Because most of the world's problems are solved by collaboration, not by competition. And even when you're competing, you have to collaborate with others to compete. So I would certainly say that I enjoy that part of my education, and I think we actually need to have more collaboration, or education should be taken more as a collaborative effort rather than as an effort where we're competing with each other. Because when you get out in the real world, there's literally nothing that you can do on your own. You have to be working within a team environment almost all the time.
That is true. That is true. Thank you, Prime Minister. On to our next question, business. During a recent discussion of the 2026 World Government Summit, you mentioned Grenada's intention to develop a Digital Asset Business Act modeled after the Bermudas. Could you advise when we can expect formal motion or public roadmap towards drafting and tabling this legislation, and whether there will be stakeholder consultation with local entrepreneurs and investors as part of the process? Question from Brice.
Thank you, Brice, for the question. I think we can start first with the consultation and the stakeholder engagement, because I think that before we even draft the legislation, we need to actually do that. And so I expect that from as early as March of this year, we will begin the process. To some extent, the idea and the thinking here is to try and jumpstart our process by sort of piggybacking on the Bermudan model and collaborating with Bermuda as a possible regulator to be able to allow us to get there much faster. Because even if we pass the legislation, as it stands currently, we do not have any experience in the regulatory space itself. So the idea here is that if we are able to partner with Bermuda, then we would have the experience of a well-known, reputable regulator that can help us, assist us in getting to the point where we are also well respected because we have a partner that is a well-known regulator. So yes, The stakeholder consultation, I think we are likely to start in March. Once we have confirmation from the Premier of Bermuda and his team that we can have the collaboration going. And then I would say within 90 days or so after the extensive consultations, then we probably should be in a position where we can have the policy document and potential legislation in Parliament.
Okay, thank you, Prime Minister. On to our next question, national security. What are government's plans to upgrade the Coast Guard facility in True Blue? From NKE.
Thank you. We do plan to do so. It's it is one of our to-do list items for the police and the Coast Guard. And in addition, you may be aware that we're also purchasing a major Coast Guard vessel of significant size, costing in excess of 22 million US. It's the type of vessel that can, in fact, stay at sea for 6 months without having to come to shore, and would be able to take significant numbers. Because Coast Guard means you should be on the sea, not on land. And so we are also working on that. So that's a significant investment that we're looking at.
Okay. Thank you, Prime Minister. On to our next question. I believe that was our last question. So what we are going to do now, we're going to take another break. When we come back, we take in the DMs on the street.
My name is Dr. Abigail Noel, and I am the head of department at the Accident and Emergency Department. One thing I love about Mount Sinai is their spirit of collaboration. They came in with ideas that have transformed our department in real time. The implementation of ID bands for every patient that comes through the emergency department. That has decreased patient errors. They have implemented defibrillators on every ward. Thus far, 128 staff members have been trained in defibrillator use. The huddle system is basically small meeting with all team members. It improves communication between staff members as well as with patients. This transformation means everything to the emergency department and by extension the health system of Grenada.
Welcome back. Thank you so much for being here with us today. We are now moving to our DMs on the street with Norris.
Hello, Mr. Prime Minister. My name is Ava Tamer of the Anglican High School 1H. As a young leader yourself, how can you help create opportunities for active leaderships for the youth right now?
Well, thank you very much for the question. Well, I think we can start with a number of things, even in the context of just your home environment or your school environment. And for example, if we take simple things like Girl Guides, if you're a boy, if you take things like Scouts, if you take things like the cadets, if you take your sports meet, leadership is ultimately about service and being able to get the job done, being able to inspire and motivate others. So within our education system itself, it's important for our young people to realize that is in fact what education is meant to do. It's meant to train you to lead. And there are simple opportunities. I've just given some examples in which that can happen. But I think in a more formal setting, there are a number of programs within the Ministry of Youth, for example, when you think of things like the Youth Parliamentarians, which is designed to help people understand how government works, how parliament works, how policy and lawmaking work, so that you could influence and lead programs and policies ultimately and get the experience. There are mentorship programs as well. There are opportunities for networking, so that you actually get to learn about things. There are opportunities for mentorship programs where people can be, or internship programs with the government. So these are just some of the examples. But I think for us, creating more clubs within the communities, so when we do things like having the steel bands re-established amongst our parish communities, that is part of the opportunities for leadership, because somebody has to become leader of the band. Someone has to be able to command the players. Someone has to be able to direct them, inspire them, motivate them. When things are down and they're not feeling to practice, motivate them to practice. So all of that is part of how you learn to become a leader. Opportunities for going on the show and asking your questions. You'd recall there's a young lady from St. Mark who was bold enough to call and say that Cowell needs a road, and then it spurred action. So in many instances, leadership is sometimes about the collective experiences you gather along the way. That makes you into a confident person, that makes you into someone who wants to serve your community, serve your church, serve your school, serve your village, and then ultimately your Grenada. So I would say to you, when there are opportunities to serve and work in your school, put up your hand, because there's no better training for leadership than work, than service and a spirit of volunteerism.
Great. Thank you, Prime Minister. We're now taking our next question.
My name is Kelly Mahan, and I am the deputy head girl of the school. My question for the Prime Minister is that seeing that Olympics is in the next 2 years, is the government going to put more forward to sports such as boxing, taekwondo, judo, and fencing instead of just athletics?
Thank you. That's a very good question. I think it's more like a recommendation to the government.
Yes.
It's something that I certainly can take back to the Ministry of Youth and Sports. We appreciate that track and field is the dominant, in a sense, sport in Grenada, particularly amongst young people, and obviously fueled by the inter-secondary and inter-primary schools rivalry, and obviously by the success we've had on the international stage with our track and field athletes. But the other sports, cricket, for example, is becoming an Olympic sport. But some of the other sporting disciplines, swimming, as you can see, we're investing in the swimming pool so that we can actually try and produce even greater swimming athletes. But boxing, karate, judo, all of these are examples that we certainly could I think, support more and perhaps encourage more so that there are opportunities there for Grenadians as well.
Great. Thank you, Prime Minister. I think it's asked in the right season too. It's sports season.
It's sports season.
Thank you. On to our next question.
Hi, my name is Kiana Dixon, and I'm in Form 1S1. Hi, Prime Minister. What advice would you give to young leaders who want to make a positive impact in their communities?
All right. Well, I think, I probably will have to repeat the answer that I had earlier, which is being prepared to be of service and be of help to others. That's really the best way to make an impact is to help someone. And that doesn't always involve a great deal. Sometimes a simple conversation, a word of encouragement, saying thank you, smiling, being pleasant to people, seeing someone needs help, and even if you can't help them, bringing the fact that they need help to the attention of others who might be in a position to help. Simple things like that make a significant impact on people. So I would say start with the small things as a young leader. If you know you're in school, for example, we had this example where a child from the Samaritan school in St. Patrick, I think, met me and indicated that there were students in our classroom who needed exercise books and bags and so on because their parents couldn't afford it. So this was a student who was empathetic enough to realize there were other students who needed help. She came to the Prime Minister's office and she went back with the books and the bags and so on to be able to help her fellow students. So she wasn't thinking about herself. She didn't say, Prime Minister, I want this or I want that. She didn't ask for anything for herself. She actually asked for something for her fellow students, and that's the kind of impact. As a result, they actually visited the school and so on. So I think that's the kind of activities and actions we want from young persons who want to make an impact. So you can start with your friends. If you know there's a fellow student who doesn't have lunch, or doesn't have breakfast, or may not have the books, you could start by saying to your parents, can I help? Can I lend them my books? Can you buy the book for her? Etc. And those little things will go a long way. You'd probably make a friend for life. And you'd also recognize that there's enormous personal gratification from knowing that you can help a fellow student or a fellow villager.
Yes. Thank you, Prime Minister. Now we're on to our next question.
Well, good afternoon. What's your name?
Good afternoon. My name is Phoebe Rubin.
All right. If you were the Minister of Infrastructure, what would you do?
Well, for one, I would widen the roads and fix some of the holes because there's some deep holes in the road. I would also limit the load amount in the big trucks because some of them are too heavy, which are causing the deep holes in the road. I would also add more mirrors to the sharp corners so to cause less accidents and damage to the walls and the sidewalks. Thank you.
I love that reverse concept.
Yes, well, I think all of what she says, I wholeheartedly agree with her. And I can only pledge that we are at the Ministry of Infrastructure working to be able to address those issues. Certainly on the road side, in some instances, the roads are conditions beyond repair. We actually need to rebuild. Oh, yeah. And so we are, as I said, we've looking at some packages, starting with from Point Salines all the way to Westall Point, and then from Westall Point, Old Westall, all the way to the St. Paul's Police Station. That's the Old Westall Mondelez Road. We're also looking to do a package from the Decor gas station or the Tempe roundabout back to Mount Kuma. So that will take care of the Bolio area. We have to fix the Mabuya area, which is the entrance of Mount Nesbitt, Mount Granby area there. That takes us back to Guag, which has been out of commission, I think, for almost 30 years, if I'm not mistaken. So we're working on that. Also along the same Western Main Road, there's some areas from Mount Moritz all the way down that have major subsidence and sliding. That is also under consideration. And then obviously once the pipe laying is complete, the entire Grandlands Main Road all the way into the Carnage will have to be dealt with as well. So in fact, it means that there will be enormous road construction taking place starting in probably around the middle of the year. We have also, I think finally it's been shipped, procured the pothole patcher truck. That would allow us to finally begin to start tackling the potholes in a modern and efficient manner rather than in the way it's been done perhaps for the last 100 years. So we're also working on that. And certainly the Transport Commission, the RGPF, we are going to have to begin to tackle the issue of regulating, as she so rightly pointed out, the size and the weight of trucks and the excessive overloading of trucks that is taking place, which obviously our roads were not built for. The widening of the roads is a little challenging because obviously we don't have flat land, and in many instances people are already built right up to the road. So to some extent widening is going to be limited. What has to happen obviously is maintenance. If it's maintained consistently and the road itself is good, then you'd find there's perhaps less need for widening. Or alternatively, it will require a complete new highway, if I may put it this way, in some cases bypassing a lot of the curves and so on, as a sort of long-term development that can take us anywhere from St. Patrick to the south of the island in 40 minutes. But that is going to cost hundreds of millions of dollars. It will require significant engineering work. And in terms of the three possible routes, which is through the middle of the island, the east coast or the west coast, probably the west coast is still the best bet, simply because the elevation there is probably the least, the congestion is probably the least, and you might be able to bypass some of the areas by building the road into the sea, and obviously as bridges. So in the long term, that is something that has to be looked at, because it still takes quite about an hour and 15 minutes to get from St. Patrick or Leverett to St. George's. And if you want to open up the northern part of the island, obviously we have to look at the road infrastructure. But the mirrors, I agree with. How we address the getting less load on the trucks, that is also something we'll have to review and legislate on and enforce. The parking on the roads, you didn't mention that, but that is also a challenge as well for traffic, and we have to come to a point where we limit the number of vehicles a household can have, and where you don't get permission to import a vehicle if you don't have a private place to park it, because the public road should not be the place where you park your vehicles, especially on the main road. So I certainly think she can be a good Minister of Infrastructure.
I agree totally. Thank you, student. We appreciate your ideas.
Yeah, maybe I can invite her to come into the ministry and help us.
I think so. I think so. Now on to our final question in this segment.
Well, welcome to DMs on the Street, sir. What's your name?
My name is Davil Charles.
All right. So I have a question for you.
Yes, sir.
If you were the Minister of Infrastructure for one day, what would you do?
Well, if I was the Minister of Infrastructure for one day, what I would do is I would apply more pressure on the contractors that are dealing with the Grenada Road at the moment. Because personally, I feel like it's taking too long to get this done, and the people of Grenada are complaining about the roads of Grenada. So I would apply more pressure on the contractors to get that done as swiftly as possible, as fast as they could, if I was the Minister of Infrastructure for one day.
Thank you, sir.
You're welcome.
All right.
Yes. I have to call a 5 a.m. meeting, I guess. But no, I agree with him, and I think I've spoken on this issue. And, you know, at the end of the day, the contractor and the people doing work are Grenadians. And so I say to people, it's not just the pace of the work, but the how as well. And I've never been satisfied. And, well, in some areas, you could tell the work has been done neatly. If you take the Lagoon area, for example, you can see that whoever's cutting the road is cutting it, and they're making, in my view, a genuine effort to mitigate the risk. And you can see that the road is then being compacted relatively quickly and in a proper manner. If you take the portion that is taking place right now over the fall edge and so on, it's a disaster. Right? There's no other way to describe it. It seems to me whoever is doing it honestly does not care about the road users, right? And that's part of the challenge that we face here. And that's why I've talked about those things, because I've tried to stay out of it, given that it was essentially a NAWASA project in the context that it's NOASA obviously who working with our funding agencies, that's the implementing agency, and obviously the contractor is responsible for reinstatement of the road and for taking measures to mitigate it. But I'm not putting my mouth in any basket to say, in my view, the contractor has done an abysmal job in or at least whoever they've subcontracted the trenching to in some parts. They've done. You can see that. You can see the soft mud and so on that is put back in the night, and you see the trenches and so on that is created, and that's not necessary, because then you can go on the Lagoon Road and you don't see that. So whoever is doing the Lagoon Road part, clearly that crew is doing a good job. Whoever is doing the part along the Port Highway is doing an awful job. And just as the young man from GBSS is saying, it's the kind of stuff that we should not have to tell the contractors about, right? If they cared, they do a much better job. So we are hoping, yes, we are trying to put as much pressure as we could. In fact, I threatened to have the Ministry of Infrastructure take over the roadworks, and then whether we build NOASA or the contractor or whoever for it. But of course, let's put it this way, talk me down from doing it. But if this continues and there aren't steps taken to remedy it, we may very well intervene.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Prime Minister. And thank you, student, for that suggestion. I think we need to bring in maybe a student or two from every secondary school. I think their opinions.
No, well, I mean, they're citizens of the country and they have the right. They're impacted by what is happening. They have to get to school. And they have to drive through this, and they're doing so every day. So they're on the buses, right? They're the ones taking the buses. I'm sure I mean, we're aware that the bus drivers are threatening to strike over the conditions of the road. And that's what I'm saying. It's no excuse, because you can see the alternative. You can see when it's been done properly, and you can see when it's not been done, properly. So there's really no excuse for it not being done properly.
Yeah, that one is a tough one. It's going on for a while too. So, Prime Minister, thank you. We are going to conclude or wrap up that segment now. When we come back, we take in your live calls.
Bay Leaf, another of Project 500 signature design. This 3-bedroom, 1.5 bathrooms, a beauty, spans a gross area of 1,073 square feet. Built with fully insulated reinforced walls and insulated roof, Bay Leaf is crafted for comfort, efficiency, and sustainable living. The design achieves 100% efficiency in its superstructure. Inside, you'll find low-flow plumbing fixtures, large windows providing maximum ventilation, and a 25% greater efficiency than current building code requirements. Spacious bedroom, an open floor plan living, kitchen, and dining area. It is true to its name. Bay Leaf brings comfort and peace the moment you walk in. At Project 500, we're more than just building homes. We're about building sustainable communities and delivering quality homes for all families.
Welcome back. We are now on to the home stretch, and it is that time when we take in your calls. Remember the number 423-3104. Please call in. We are waiting to hear from you. We do have a call online. Good evening, caller. Thank you so much. Good evening, caller.
Hi, good evening.
Good evening, ma'am.
Good evening, Mr. Prime Minister. This is Trudy Thomas calling from Bathway. You know who I am if you've seen my picture.
Good evening.
Good evening. So I want to start off with the roads in Bathway.
Yes.
So I've contacted Mr. Cornwall a few times about it. And when I approached him last year, the thing he said to me was, well, just use the Rose Hill Road, which is unsatisfactory because that road isn't good either. And there's people that have no choice but to drive on the Bathway Road because they either got to do it to go to Sally or they got to do it to go to Rose Hill. But it seems like Mr. Cornwall is doing it just before Easter, which is when he did it last year. And the road was great. But this is high season for tourists, and nothing is done. The road, I don't know if you took that road last week when you were here or if you went to Rose Hill, but the road is atrocious. It's awful, and it needs to be done. Like, the vendors are missing out in Bathway because they're not getting any customers. The tour buses aren't coming to Bathway because of the road conditions. We're losing out. And I wrote a poem, which I won't give it to you tonight, but Bathway is Grenada's forgotten treasure because nobody wants to come here.
Okay. All right, so thank you for that. I did travel on the road, and I'm aware that the conditions of the road have deteriorated significantly because of the heavy equipment, the trucks and so on that are obviously carrying significantly heavy construction materials affiliated with the hotel project in Leverett. So I think initially the thinking was that because the construction project is obviously going to go on for a significant period of time, the thinking was that attempts to repair the road will to some extent be an exercise in futility because the size of the equipment, the weight, the frequency of it until the hotel is constructed or at least substantially completed. The thinking was that we'd wait then until doing the road. Having said that, I will accept myself that having traveled on the road and seen the conditions, that we are going to have to rethink this, and I think some mitigating measures are going to have to be taken. I don't want to say, and I know you've said Mr. Cornwall, but it's not really Mr. Cornwall's responsibility. It's really ultimately the Ministry of Infrastructure. I mean, obviously he's the MP, and so he has to advocate on behalf of the citizens there, and it's something that he's raised on quite a number of occasions, and we had sort of come down on the basis of recognizing that if we went and attempted to repair the road, that it would be destroyed again in short order. But I think we, as I said, will have to relook this because I do agree with you that the condition is atrocious, and obviously we also want to mitigate the economic impact on the residents and vendors. So whether that means in a sense grading the entire road and compacting it so that it's less bumpy and sort of constantly monitoring and doing so, or whether looking at perhaps a harder membrane which is to concrete it or the entirety of it while the construction goes on is another option that we'll have to discuss with the engineers and with the contractors who are obviously doing the hotel project in Battery. But I accept that it's an intolerable situation and that we would have to take steps to try and address it in the shortest possible time.
Thank you, Prime Minister, and thank you, caller. We do have another call online. Good evening, caller. Thank you for participating.
Hi, good evening.
Good evening, ma'am.
Good evening, Mr. PM.
Good evening.
Excuse me, but I was in the gym, so I had to come out the gym to call you. So if I'm kind of short of breath, it's because I was on a treadmill running.
Well, that's good.
Mr.
Happy
PM,
to hear that you're exercising.
Thank you. Mr. PM, I really value this opportunity to speak with you again. And I'm reading, right, and I don't have my glasses. My name is Desi from Boston. I am a born Grenadian, but does not know what Grenada looked like. However, in light of the recent tragedy involving the young ladies, many citizens are deeply concerned about the safety of our girls and women. Beyond responding after incidents occur, what proactive steps is your government taking to strengthen prevention and empowerment in our schools? Would you consider implementing structured self-defense and personal safety program led by certified martial artists or trained law enforcement officers to equip young girls with skills, confidence, and awareness to better protect themselves?
So the answer is yes. I have no difficulty with, in fact, encouraging and supporting such initiatives. But to some extent, that probably applies where the violence is coming from a third party who's a stranger. You know, but in many instances, the challenge we face here is that the violence is coming from partners that know the victims. And so, for example, when persons are in a domestic abuse situation, even if they have the skill set to fight, even if they know karate or they may know judo, the truth is the mental and emotional abuse that comes oftentimes paralyzes the person's ability to defend themselves, and usually that comes after a sustained period of that abuse. So, yes, I have absolutely no issues with supporting whether it's karate, self-defense, training for girls or children in schools, in community groups, in clubs, etc. In addition to the fact that that's obviously healthy and helps with exercise as you're doing. But also, I think fundamentally, we have to get to the point where the perpetrators, we have less and less perpetrators and less persons who are prepared to tolerate the sort of situations that put them at risk for domestic or intimate partner violence. So in many instances, the violence is not stranger-led violence. Some instances it is, but in the vast majority of the cases that we are dealing with, particularly for domestic violence, intimate partner violence, is where people know each other and they're in a relationship, and you then have the violence taking place.
Thank you, Prime Minister, and thank you, caller, for your question. We do have another call online. Good evening. Thank you for calling.
Hi, good evening. Good evening, Mr. Prime Minister. I have 3 quick questions.
Sure.
I understand that we have gotten a lot of scholarships for some doctors and so, but I know we do have a problem with regards to retaining our awarded scholarship individuals. So I'm hoping that we have a plan moving forward with regards to preventing that from happening. Also, this is the 3rd time I'm asking for the list that the Minister of Health had said that he would put out with regards to the list of professionals that we need in Grenada, so individuals would know what to go to study, or individuals in the diaspora can know if their position is needed and if they should return if they wish. And my last question is, if we're going to have like a call for persons in the diaspora or just non-Grenadians who wish to maybe come to Grenada to work, seeing that we are saying that we have a shortage of skilled professionals, as well as it can be a method to increase the population. These are my 3 questions.
Thank you very much, and they're very, very good, very valid questions. I'll take the second one first, which is the list from the Minister of Health. I will undertake to make sure we at least have the list ready by the time we have the next show. The list that I had gotten from the minister was actually just a list of unfulfilled positions within the public service, within the Ministry of Health. So we can start there. I can also perhaps ask the Project Polaris team, which is the team working on the new hospital, to give us an indicative list of the types of positions that are likely to be available within the context of Project Polaris, so that people can begin to start assessing whether there are opportunities there for them and whether they would like to come back, because obviously the recruitment will start long before the hotel is actually, long before the hospital is actually finished. So that's the second thing that I will undertake to do as well. And even if I don't do it, then we can always give the Project Polaris team an opportunity to come on this show as well, and to talk about the opportunities that will be available once the project comes on stream, so that persons in the diaspora, persons home, persons who want to go and study and want to look at scholarships could look at the career opportunities that will be there. And that leads me into talking about how we intend to retain the existing scholarships talent after the completion of their education and their rotation and so on. And part of it is actually linked very much to Project Polaris, because the idea here is that both Project Polaris and the statutorization of the hospitals, the intent is to allow, therefore, for the pay scale and the benefits associated with working in the health sector to be improved dramatically, right? We cannot do it in the current public service construct, because what applies to some extent to healthcare workers applies to public workers, applies to teachers, applies to policemen, applies to, so you have these bands of salaries, you have this tiered system, and everyone works sort of within that construct regardless of your skill set, regardless of your talent. And it's very difficult to go outside of that because of the fiscal rules that governs wages and benefits and salaries. So recognizing the need to put a lot more financing into the healthcare sector, recognizing the need to be able to retain talent by being able to pay them more, we have to create a system outside of the public service system, which is why the statutorization is taking place, so that we can actually pay market rates, and that we can get financing through the National Health Insurance, for example, and private financing, because as it stands now, healthcare in Grenada is free. It's one of the key things we need to remember. As much as we complain about the quality of healthcare or accessibility to healthcare, you don't really have to pay for it, right? If you walk into the hospital, nobody's really charging you anything. If you go to a medical center or health center, no one is really charging you anything, which is not the case in most of the countries. So we need to get to the point where those of us who can pay. Those of us who have private health insurance, that we can use the health insurance. Because if again, I have private health insurance. If I go to the general hospital, no one is asking me for my surgical card. right? If I go to a private dentist or a doctor, they will ask for the surgical card. So we have to be able to make sure that all of that the government system, Project Polaris, the statutorization, that they can capture that revenue. By capturing that revenue, you will then be able to pay the healthcare workers, the doctors, the nurses better, and be able to retain them. So that's part of the strategy that we also looking to adopt in terms of how we retain healthcare workers. And so, yes, I will certainly be, we are working on some internal issues that we need to iron out, for example, in the current healthcare sector. One, the regularization of those healthcare workers, and that includes doctors, nurses, orderlies, who are currently not regularized, because they too would have been part of the same one-year contract system, or this unestablished worker system, or in some instances, no document at all to say that they're working for the government or the state of Grenada. So we are trying to collect all the data, and that's part of the problem. When someone doesn't have a document, even establishing that they work for the government, so when you come to ask them, when did you start to work? What was your first salary? How long have you been working? When did you get increases? All of that now we have to try and document. So we have a complete picture, so we can actually engage in that regularization, do the audit as to, okay, where we have sufficient, where we have insufficient, and then be able to make the call as we go through the statutorization and as we go to the Project Polaris, to then say to the diaspora, to then say people in Grenada, these are the areas. But I can certainly point to it, for example, there's some areas where we are, in a sense, completely dependent on foreign support. For example, ultrasound department, for example, currently is completely staffed by 3 Cubans, right? If we don't have them, right? So that's one area. Anesthesiology, I think. We've had chronic shortages there where sometimes we couldn't even perform surgery because no one was available, right? And when we had visiting surgeons, they had to bring the anesthesiologist with them to be able to actually have the. So that's one area where for sure I could say, just from off the top of my head, we need support on a consistent basis to be able to address those issues. I know we've made attempts in the hospital and so on to start addressing some of those. So this is just some of the examples. The specialist doctors, we have a significant shortage of specialist doctors. We have GPs, but specialist doctors is one of the main areas, because obviously after you do your sort of general qualification as a doctor, you then have to have experience and you have to go back and study. And that's where a lot of the challenges, and that's perhaps where a lot of the people stay. After having become specialized in their field, they stay in the greener pastures. So that's one area where certainly we could be asking persons to come back. So I would say Project Polaris, certainly the statutory transition team that is working on the statutorization, and the Ministry of Health would be better placed to provide the kind of details. But I think that's a critical question that was asked. I know the statutory transition team is beginning, I think, as of today, to engage in stakeholder consultations so that they can explain to the public what statutorization means, the roadmap, what it is we're doing, and how it will benefit. And I think this is one of the critical things I want to emphasize, how it will benefit the healthcare workers, right? And I could perhaps just give obvious examples. If you compare the salaries of a NAWASA worker, Airports Authority worker, Port Authority, with central public servants, you would see that they get paid better, right? And one of the reasons for that is because NAWASA is its own rate collecting entity. The port is its own rate collecting entity. The airport is its own rate collecting entity, and its revenues are used for its business, so to speak, and to pay its staff and so on, as opposed to all of us who fit within, like myself, the larger public service, where you depend purely on the taxpayers' revenue. So the idea is that the hospital services should move to a system where it becomes mixed, where genuinely we protect those who can't pay, and we have a funding mechanism. National health insurance, for example, could be that funding mechanism. Those who can't pay. Those who have private health insurance can pay the private health insurance, and those who can afford to pay out of their pocket, they pay. So that there's a revenue stream that allows us to retain the talent we need and to offer better quality service to the members of the public who are then being served by the healthcare system.
Okay, all right. Thank you, Prime Minister. Thank you, caller, for your questions. We move on now to our final caller for the evening. Good evening, caller. Thank you for calling.
All right. Good evening. Last but not least,
certainly not.
Mr. Prime Minister.
Yes, sir. Good evening.
Karakou. I was across there recently. I've been a supporter of Kayak Match for the last 5 or so years. Actually, since 2015, so that's like about 10. I'm still a little disappointed with the pace I've seen with some of the, like the old port, the new port, even some of the the private properties. I don't know if government has the power, like some of the debris and so on. And I'm concerned that if, let's say, not necessarily another huge storm, but like so much of things are still on the ground, like the wind can I remember after I think like Ivan, we still had some of the stuff that damaged when I think Emily passed because it picked back up some of them stuff that they clean up yet and caused damage to persons who repair. So I'm hoping that some work can be done with Caribou. That's one. And last one is that the road. I want to agree with what you were saying. I think at this point, government should take over the progress with the road, and if not, at least work in conjunction, because what I'm noticing that where some of the trench are fixed, the potholes are not. So I know the trench are the private contractor, but the potholes on the good side is the government. So I think Ministry of Infrastructure needs to work so that we have one closure. So if they're closing, let's say, from Food Fair, so foliage, and they do in that area, let the Ministry of Infrastructure have their team doing the pothole side by side. So when that time is done, that whole section is complete. And having the trench fill up, and then now you still have to be dodging potholes and so on. So that's my contribution. Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you very much for the contribution. Both of them are well taken. In the case of Carriacou, some of the, for example, the port building that has been damaged, I'll have to get an update from the port as to, I too noted that no work has started on the reconstruction of the building, so I would seek to endeavor to get a update from the port. So that's one sort of obvious big building that I'm aware of where repair work has not commenced. I can't speak, however, to there not being a cleanup. I think certainly my sense, I was in Carriacou just recently, the cleanup job in my view has been phenomenal. I'm sure there's still debris around, but to a large extent, millions and millions of dollars was spent cleaning up on land and on sea as well, including lifting all of the old boats and all of the boats that sank or went aground as a result of the hurricane. So I mean, as I said, the port building for sure is one building that I know that has not been repaired, but that's a matter that the Port Authority will have to speak to as to why and what are its plans for repairing the building. If there's still loose debris in various parts and so on, then obviously we could always look at it to make sure that it doesn't pose a danger to persons, not simply because of whether we worried about another storm, but obviously we would prefer not to have a loose debris around because of the environmental impact that it may have on persons. In terms of the road, I agree. Some of the potholes were in fact caused by the roadworks, because the excavators that are being used to cut the trenches, some of these things are metal and they're sitting on the road itself, and it's not just the trench, they've actually, in a sense, damaged the structure of the road alongside as well. So and then because there's so much loose stone and debris and so on the surface of the road in general, the entire integrity of the surface of the road has been compromised in many cases. Part of the challenge obviously is that the pipes also have to be pressure tested, and so to some extent the trenches are left exposed much longer than we would have preferred if we didn't have the pressure testing to address. But we must have the pressure testing done. But I agree with your suggestion that it does in fact make sense to have, in a sense, the two crews, if you may put it this way, or one crew simply doing the work. For me, it's part of the challenge of what you see in Grenada, because you think that if you see a pothole next to where you're covering an entire trench, you will just address the pothole one time. But I suppose it's just part of the mindset that we have to deal with in some of those instances. But your suggestion, I think, is a valid one, and it's certainly something we should perhaps look to implement.
Thank you, Prime Minister, and thank you, caller, for your contribution today. Prime Minister, it was another successful program, one that started somber, but I think we did get some light moments together with some great suggestions from our young people. Yes. Any parting words?
Yes, well, Desi, I have a parting word for Desi, or Boston caller. If you've never been to Grenada, we'd certainly like to invite you to come down. If you're a Grenadian in Boston, we have the homecoming in June and July, so we'd certainly want to welcome you and ask you to encourage all of the Grenadians in the diaspora to come home to beautiful Grenada. Despite the two tragic incidents, Grenada still remains a very safe country, And we want to encourage all of our first, second, and third generation Grenadians in the diaspora, and if they go beyond that, fourth and fifth, to come back home and experience Grenada.
Yes, great. Thank you very much, Prime Minister. Always a pleasure being here with you and listening to you share. So that's where we conclude for today. We say thank you to all our listeners, Power FM, Star FM, We FM, GBN, Fusion FM, Vibes FM, GIS, and on our Facebook and YouTube channels. It is always a pleasure, rather, to be here with you. And as we part, we want to remind you, remember, as Prime Minister said today, we all have a responsibility in this. Let us do what we can so that we can rid our island of this scourge. Domestic violence, violence against women, no. To our technical team, thank you again. Thank you for always being here and ensuring that this happens. To you, our listeners and our viewers, final thank you. I'm your host, Jocelyn Crosby. Remember, we'll be back here again with you next Tuesday when we do this all over again with DMs with PM.